Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen. Mein Name ist Matthias Fleig und es freut mich, Sie im Namen des eLearning-Journals zu unserem heutigen Interview begrüßen zu dürfen. Wir werden im Herbst von Oktober bis November eine neue digitale Eventreihe haben werden, das sogenannte Summit Campus, in dem wir 6 Masterclasses zu dem Thema Learning Ecosystems machen werden. Und vor dem Summit Campus im Rahmen dieser Eventreihe führen wir mit unseren Special Guests, jeder Masterclass hat einen Special Guest, Interviews, um schon mal so in das Thema einzusteigen und schon mal unsere Special Guests ein bisschen kennenzulernen. Und es freut mich heute, ein Interview zu führen mit Elliott Masie, einer der Pioniere im E-Learning-Bereich, vor allem in den USA, der uns zu seiner Keynote und zu aktuellen Trends einen Einblick geben wird. Viel Spaß mit dem Interview. So, Elliot, first of all, nice to meet you and thank you for your time. Before we go into our interview, can you introduce yourself, say a few sentences about yourself?
Hello, I'm Elliott Masie, and today I'm coming to you from New York in the United States. I have spent my life, and it's now in the world of learning, about over 50 years, focusing in on the relationship between learning and technology, and obviously how to be successful in our roles, our jobs, and our careers. I am either praised or criticized of having been one of the early people to help introduce e-learning in the 1990s. And over the years, I focus on the changes that have occurred. So both with the role of the internet, with now conversations about artificial intelligence, and also figuring out how do we make learning a natural part of our work lives. In addition, because I enjoy doing two things in life, I am also a producer of over 41 Broadway theater musicals and the like. And the connection is my life has been about storytelling. And whether it's Broadway or in the learning world, storytelling is my passion.
As one of the leading experts in educational technologies and e-learning, I bet you have seen a lot of development, a lot of trends, a lot of technical innovation in the L&D space. So I would be interested in what are current trends that you think are interesting or will shape the industry in the next, let's say, 5 years.
There are many trends that we need to look at. Some of them, believe it or not, are the result of our experience with COVID and the pandemic and with much of the world working from home. Our comfort today doing this interview via Zoom without a rehearsal, without high technical readiness. One of the things that occurred through the pandemic is a naturalization of using virtual technology to deliver support, training, a meeting, or the like. But some of the other changes that have occurred as a result of either shifts in technology or shifts in the business and the career marketplace. The technologies, and I know we'll talk more about it, range from everybody thought the metaverse was coming and we were going to all have our Xbox goggles on. Maybe that's not really going to be the leading headline, but certainly our conversations about artificial intelligence, about machine learning are going to be a big piece of where learning and development is. And at the same time, our learners are changing. Career expectations are changing. Even the idea coming through the pandemic that we might be able to work from anywhere, that we might actually over our lives have many shorter, what we call gig jobs rather than 20-year career jobs. And finally, I would argue we have changed our view of how we want to learn as learners, whether or not the organizations are there. We want things a little shorter. We want them more personalized. We want to learn what I need today and maybe return to it tomorrow. And finally, I would argue we are hopefully, and I use the word hopefully, figuring out how cohorts learn, which mean how can I learn in a way that I leverage the colleagues that I have, whether they are in the office with me or whether I'm in New York and you're in Germany, and we do that in a virtual environment. So much is changing, and I would argue it's going to keep changing for a while. There is no stability in the world of learning and development, which excites me because I think that's where innovation will happen.
I agree with you. I think the L&D space is more important than ever on the one hand, but that is going into my next question. At least here in Germany, I feel like that L&D is still often considered a nice to have and not a must have for a business, and is usually not integrated in strategic decisions in the company, the decision-making process of the company. So in your experience, how does L&D get a seat at the table, so to speak?
It's a wonderful question. Intriguingly, learning, not L&D, learning needs a seat at the table, and it actually has one. When I meet with CEOs of corporations or senior executives, inevitably the conversation becomes, how can we get the skills that we need to have a changing organization? How do we retain our best performers? And how do we help them adapt to a world where technology is changing? So if you ask the word learning, it's sort of organic. And in fact, I think it has a seat at every table. The problem is the organization of learning and development, they don't necessarily have a seat at the table. I view in some cases, and please don't be angry or throw things at the screen, that sometimes the learning and development is viewed like the company that fixes the elevator when it breaks in your office. It's important when we have it, but we don't want to think about it much. And the way we get a seat at the table is to be talking about business, not about learning. If I talk about, well, what kind of instructional objectives do we have, or what will be the format of this course, people aren't that interested at the top of organizations. If I talk about how do we get the best performance, retain the best people in our organization, and maximize our ability to do our jobs well in a changing world, they're fascinated and wanting to have that conversation. So you need to be focusing on the effect of learning and development rather than the language and the process of L&D.
In the answer of the first question, you already alluded to AI, artificial intelligence. And I think thanks to ChatGPT, basically everyone is talking about it. So my question to you is, what do you think is the potential of AI for L&D? And in which areas might AI be beneficial to L&D?
We are certainly in a time of what I would call AI fascination. And some people would say AI hallucination. The fascination of AI is, wow, we could have what we would call a conversational interaction with data, rather than a single line request like we might do into a database or even into a search engine like Bing or Google. Now we can have a multi-level conversation with AI, which is really what ChatGPT has surfaced. It's important to note that AI is not new. It's been around for 10 years. If you've ever gone on Facebook or LinkedIn, or if you've ever done a search, or you've ever been on an e-buying site, there's AI operating. But it was AI in the infrastructure of technology. What happened literally last November is that ChatGPT came out, and I call it it's the commonality level of AI, because everybody can think about, write me a poem on how to do a really good pasta dish. And not only do I get an answer, but it rhymes. Now, it may not be a good dish, but it looks good. But that commonality of AI therefore created hopes, fascination, and hallucinations. The hopes and the fascination were, and this is where it comes to L&D, were that some of the process of building content could be done with a generative AI. Some of the thoughts were maybe we could take some jobs and evolve them so that if I need to argue about the bill I got for my April telephone bill, I could perhaps do it in a very smart online chat and then talk to a person if I need it. The hallucination of it is that it's going to change everything right away. And I put that right up there with the people who are hallucinating about the metaverse. We're all going to be walking around with our goggles. And I've got 5 sets of goggles here in my work room. And they're great and they're fascinating, but they didn't change the world. Now, I actually think what we will see is a way for learning and development to use AI for 3 things. Around the curation of content, so I can build out content. Around the editing, and this is to me an underused piece where I could literally build something and I don't ask AI to write me a course on X, but I go ahead and I write the outline and I give it to AI and say, make it better. Turn it into English and German. Put it into a different format. Wonderful process. And then the final one is personalization of data. So that ultimately, and we're not there just yet, but it's coming, where our AI will operate not just at the system level, but at the Elliott level. So for instance, if I like big type and pictures, I will have my own AI level that will say, take that content that you've done and frame it out in that. Or maybe I can speak English quite well, but my parents' language is German. So now give me the ability to have it in English and over here to have some more content in German. It's a year and a half of exploration, experimentation, research, and trying things, knowing that some of them will look good but will fail. Some of them will be amazing. And some of it is going to get much, much better in the time ahead.
I think it's a very interesting topic, AI in artificial intelligence overall. But because I think on the one hand, there is a lot of hype, but on the same time, there's also a lot of concern with the technology. So to be a bit controversial, do you think AI poses risks for L&D, or to be more to exaggerate, will ChatGPT steal my job?
AI poses risks, and the risks are either positive or negative about how you view life. Is skiing down a mountain have risks? Yes, but if you were a skier, why would you want to go down to a mountain that was simple to do? You want some risk. In the world of change, AI will create some challenges, opportunities, and differences. Now, I'm not worried it's going to steal my job because, bluntly, forget AI, our jobs are changing at an amazing rate, with or without AI. So here's a good example. Yesterday, I was on a video call with somebody who works for a very large financial company in the United States, and they were an instructional designer for the last 5 years. They got a new job yesterday. They became their prompt engineer. Their job is not to do instructional design, but to write prompts that would yield content. And so it's not just a simple sentence. It might be a sentence with commas and clarifications. Now, we didn't have prompt engineers a year ago. I hear they're being very well paid. And their employer is very worried that even though they've been on the job 2 days, they will be recruited away. So are jobs going to change? Absolutely. I think in the area of customer service, we're going to see a lot of change. And I think in the L&D space, we're going to see something, and this is my positive side of it. I know you asked the risk question here. I look at an interesting formula And if you want to write it down somewhere, which is that our opportunity is to take the phrase AI, artificial intelligence, put a plus sign, and put HI, human intelligence, because it's really the most effective when we combine the nature of what we as people know, our skills, our experience, our context, our judgment, our creativity, our empathy, with what AI does very well, which is processing data to be trained to create an output that matches our expectations. But it's the AI plus HI. I worry that if we're hallucinating about, we view that AI is going to change everything by itself. It's not. It was built by people. It's going to be deployed by people. And so we need to become comfortable with, how do I add AI to my human intelligence? And bluntly, it's going to probably create a new job, maybe with a new title, maybe with a new location. But that we live in that time of evolution and shift. I hope that the teachers in our schools for our younger students are preparing them to be in that world where they know how to leverage AI plus HI. And we're going to have to prepare a new workforce to be ready for this combination.
In the fall, we will have an event series called Summit Campus. And in part of one of our master classes, you will give a keynote on October 27th on the topic of governance. I think that's a very interesting topic because I think it's very ill-defined here in Germany. So I'm asking you, how can you define governance, and what impact does governance of a company have on L&D?
And we have to think about three levels of governance. We have governance of the company, governance at the government level, whether it be the country or the region. Europe has certainly created governance. And then there's a final one, which is governance in my own life. How do I govern? So what do we mean by governance? What I want to understand from a governance point of view is, what are the rules? What are the customs? What are the traditions? What are the expectations? All the way to, what are the prohibitions or restrictions on it? So let's look at a couple of examples. I believe that we should get to a point when AI is generated that it comes in a different font and slightly different appearance than it would if I were just typing in Word or in another form of word processing, meaning that it should be clear to the reader that they are reading something that was AI created in that sense. A second piece of governance, and some of them do it. Bard is doing it. We're seeing it start in Copilot from Microsoft. Sal Khan has their own language model, would be tagging and sourcing, which means I should be able to go in and right click on something that you got about Elliott Masie from a chat GPT, and hopefully it would say this was from the year 2017, maybe even it was from this article. Because part of what I need to know as the consumer of the output of AI is, do I trust it? And I can't trust it unless I recognize where it's from. Now, it's hard because one of my favorite drinks is an ice cream smoothie. It's where you put a couple of different foods in and you press the button. So a lot of what you're getting is already smoothie. So it might be hard to do the last part. But there's another level, which is the corporate side. What are we comfortable with or not? A good example is right now in the United States and in other parts of the world, there have been some large layoffs, primarily in the tech world. One company that I work with has recently decided to reduce their staff by about 10,000 people. Not an easy thing. It has come about that they understand that that was very much advised and structured by the use of AI. There are some organizations, and I would argue even some countries, that are saying you don't make a personnel decision automatically by AI. In other words, who do I hire? Who do I fire? Why? Well, because there could be bias in that. We want to understand it. But there's also humanity in it. I was let go by a formula in that sense. The other area of governance, and I think it's an important one, is what can we use to train AI? I'll give you an example that's probably the most interesting. Let's imagine that you go to your doctor, you have a problem, and you're seeing your doctor about a health problem. And your doctor does a good job of figuring out and prescribing, and you get better. Can that record of what the doctor did be used to train the system to help future doctors using AI? Now, I think it's good that they do that, but how do we protect my identity in that? So we're going to have to figure out what the training side of AI is. The final governance piece, and I think it is an important one, is to be able to have standards for how we're going to tag our information. Because AI only works to the extent that we can get at information rapidly by identifying, sorting, and tagging. Now, around the world right now, most organizations don't tag other than the name. So I might have a thing, interview with German magazine conference on e-learning. But what if I could put 12 tags in there? So now suddenly it becomes easier for AI to figure out what it is, why it's of value, and the like. But we are not good at tagging. We're not good at adding metadata to our content. And governance, I think, will start to do it. And by the way, a lot of the metadata could be done by technology, but do we have a governance model for that?
Just to do a bit of follow-up on the governance topic, you talked a lot about rules, basically. So I would be interested in your opinion, do a company's norms and values also fall under governance? And if so, how do they affect L&D?
Great. I'll give you a non-example, but it'll become an example. In the United States, we had some very important and painful conversations when the police had killed a person, and it led to the Black Lives Matter and the like. And many companies were wanting to make statements showing that they were empathy and support to think about the issue of racial injustice. A friend of mine who is a Black woman is the chief learning officer in a big company. And her CEO said, "Oh, great. Would you write me a speech that I can make about our opposition to racism?" And she said, "No, because it has to be authentic. It has to come from you, your experience. You can't source it to me as a Black person to tell you what to say about that." Well, let's now take that to your question about the norms and values. We have to make sure that the values of our organization are reflected by how AI works. A good example would be, let's say I'm in the hotel business, and I really want to make sure that a wide range of people use our hotels, from the people who they're getting the best value that they could, the lowest price, to somebody who wants to get the presidential suite, with its own swimming pool. I want to make sure that the AI in my system acknowledges that, what do you want as the customer? Do you want to see our lowest price, our most easily affordable, or our most luxurious? Now, if that's the value of our company, We can't let AI only push the €1 million suite because we want to make sure that the algorithm for choice reflects our values. The difficulty is that organizations are not used to articulating those values. And to be blunt, the people that do the coding aren't necessarily used to having to reflect those values. They're trying to do a good transaction in that sense. So we're going to see more and more in that governance area, looking at values. We also have to look more at what I would call the user experience. How does the user use it? And bluntly, can they trust it? So what I have found is if I get an output from anything that says the answer is Y, I'm less trusting of it if it says there are 3 possible answers, A, G, and Y. Because now I can once again take AI and add human intelligence to figure that out. This will be a wonderfully important part of that role of governance, is to reflect your values and your norms and your traditions of the organization.
The last topic I want to talk to you about is on learning ecosystems. The Summit Campus I already mentioned that we will have in the fall will be mostly on the topic of corporate learning ecosystems. And here in the DACH region, our experience has been that the topic is not very widespread and it's understood very technically. So it's mostly about what kind of systems does our company have. So I wanted to ask you, in your experience, how would you define the term corporate learning ecosystems and what are kind of the central characteristics of a learning ecosystem?
Well, you've asked a sensitive question to me. I think it's very important that we not use language that confuses or annoys or repels our learners. I'll use an interesting example. If I go to the doctor and I said, I'm the young age of 73, tell me about my health, okay? I want to hear about my health. If the doctor pulls a chart down and says, let's look at Elliott's internal biological ecosystem and what's your enzyme level, it's fascinating and I don't follow it and I don't change my behavior. So I love what the concept of the ecosystem is. I worry that the language may in fact be off-putting or difficult. What we really mean by that ecosystem is how do we look at the range in an organization of the learning resources, of learning and business data, and how do we prepare an individual to be the best performer that they could be today, and how do we also prepare them for the next role they may have in 6 months or in 2 years, and then how do we leverage the range of experience? I had a conversation with somebody who works at Amazon in their cloud area, and they have an AI there. And I was saying, one of the things I want you to add is if I give a request into my AI, but this is part of my ecosystem concept, show me some information and then show me 3 people in the company that you think it would be helpful for me to talk to. Now, if we think about an ecosystem, we're not just thinking about written content, but we're also starting to think about the collaborative nature of finding people who have that. How do I look at what are best practices outside our company so that they help me do that? So it's a wonderful term, but the average human being goes, I don't know what it is. Or they decide they put it on a sign and put it up in their trade show if they're selling their system. We support ecosystems. I get it, but I'm not sure it's the language that our user wants. If you ask somebody about their GPS, you say, well, how do you deal with your geophysical satellite enhanced locational system? No, they type in where they want to go and the monitor gets them there. So we need to be careful on the ecosystem to not make it overly intellectual and to make it pragmatic for the manager, for the learner and the employee, and for the people in L&D and in IT. Love the concept. Can't say I love the language in that sense. And I don't know, maybe there's a better German. How would you say ecosystem in German?
Funny enough, I think mostly it's just a German translation. So it's Learn Ökosystem. It's basically the German
Well,
translation of
that's
Learn
way
Ecosystem.
that's way more understandable than the English. Or I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm a good friend of George Takei, so I'll have to see in Vulcan what does learning ecosystem mean. Like go forth and prosper. Yeah.
Let's cancel out the name and talk about the concept. Do you think companies should look into the concept that stands behind the term learn ecosystem? And if so, what are the benefits of the concept that a company can benefit from?
Yes, there are two big benefits and there are two big challenges or opportunities. One is we need to look beyond our learning activities to understand the ecosystem. Very often if you ask somebody, how did you learn to do your job in the organization? And you're not wearing the badge that says, I deliver training, but if you just ask them that, they rarely mention the courses. They almost never mention the e-learning module. You know what they talk about? Sarah, who works in the building next to me, is a helpful piece of that. Or I was at another company before and I learned it and I brought it over. It is enormously important for us to recognize there are resources that help people learn and perform that aren't just traditional learning resources. They are people, there are systems, there are data. One of the big questions that people ask me is, why do people leave their jobs? And I would tell them there are two reasons. One, they don't feel like they could learn well in this organization, so they go to another one. And B, they have a horrible boss or manager. So when we think about the ecosystem, we're also thinking about the competencies of the managers that are there and the competencies of other folks that are there. It's a wonderfully important way for us to look at learning. Okay. And we need to be able to have systems that reach out of the L&D space into the business space. Even the most interesting one, you hire somebody because you might be an insurance company. They worked at another insurance company. Great. We're hiring them because they're experienced in insurance. Then they come for their first day and they go to the first course they have to take as a new employee, Insurance 101. Well, they've worked for 10 years at another. Why? Because our ecosystem doesn't take all the information that HR has when we hired the person and make it part of how we are teaching them or the like. The other piece that's really important in that ecosystem is to realize that we all have things we're very good at and things we're not good at. I'm a pretty good writer. I'm a horrible speller. I don't, because I write fast. Okay. So luckily Microsoft Word helps, it yells at me when I spell a word wrong. But what I now do is I write and then I take what I write and I put it into an AI system and it doesn't write my stuff, but it corrects it. And we've got to understand in that ecosystem, there are things we're good at, things that we're not good at. And when do we get either support, assets, resources, or the most interesting thing about an ecosystem is to say, and by the way, don't ask Elliott to do the spelling. He's good at other things, but don't ask him. And I think that's normal. If you go out with some friends for an evening, there's one person there, you never ask them to figure out the payment because you'll be an extra hour at the restaurant because that's not their competency. So part of an ecosystem is that we have data of what are we good at, what are we not good at, how do we get better at that? And also there's a piece that people don't talk a lot about. is this a task I want to teach them? Or is it a task I can then build workflow support and prompting that will help them do it even if they don't know how to do it, that the technology can bring them to. It's a wonderful, wonderful concept. As I said, maybe we'll come up with a better term for it. Yeah.
To wrap it up, why shouldn't we miss your keynote on October 27th?
Well, I hope to be relevant, provocative, and occasionally funny. And part of what I think is important, I love going to different learning experiences, whether they're virtual or in person, is to have conversations and to hear stories and to be given questions that challenge me, inspire me, or in some cases, validate or affirm what I believe in. So I guarantee you, I will not be mild. I will be very specific. And the best news of all, I am not trying to sell you anything. So I'm an analyst who has nothing to sell. So I will be very direct. And by the way, for those of you in Germany, my father was born in Hamburg and left in 1938, and I also have a German passport. So ich bin ein Hamburger. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of our interview. I really enjoyed your answers. I am looking very much forward to your keynote in the fall. And I hope you had a bit of fun in our interview as well.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Have a great day and thank you for your time. Bye.